So my name is Peter Young, and I am a Yale graduate, and I'm one of the four volunteers that have been running the Yale Career Panels now since April of 2012. This is the 55th one that we've done, and we keep thinking we're going to run out of professions, but it's amazing how many professions there are out there, right? And this all really started because a number of us recruit, and we recruit at schools like Yale. And what we notice is that although there are plenty of really, really good students, you know, they're bright and well, the biggest dilemma was the fact that most of them had very distorted understandings of different career. I think the crescendo once was when I was interviewing this guy, and he said, I run a firm called Young Partners Investment Bank, and he said, well, if it's investment banking, it's Younger Partners. If it's consulting, and he made name a consulting firm. And then he said, if it's medical school, it's Harvard Medical School. And I said, how are you going to decide between those? I mean, now tell me what you perceive about each one of those. And he was way, way off. You know, he said, consulting, I'm going to fly all over the world. I'm going to be in Paris, then I'm going to be in London, whatever. But if you're the recruiter, you can't really say, well, no, that's not true, because it sounds like you're being, sissy, right? So that's when a group of us decided we really ought to have this program. And I'm very pleased to have this panel, two of whom are veterans who've been on this panel before. We have a very diverse group. We have three different firms, one very large, one in the middle, and one smaller. So it's like the three bears, but also, very diverse by gender, by race, but also by how long each of you has been at your firms, which is important to have that kind of diversity as well. So the last thing I would say, though, is the whole idea here is for you to get some candid understanding, both good and bad, about professions, about and what kind of person does well in these, and what kind of person should really avoid consulting altogether because they're just not a good fit, right? And I would encourage all of you that you can listen to all these career panels, but the one thing you need to do, and if you've done it already, that's great. But if you haven't, I would encourage you is to do a really good self-assessment of what do you like, what don't you like, what are you really good at, what you're not good at, and try to get some help too from friends who know you, who are willing to be honest, because you can have all the information in the world about about professions, but if you have a distorted view about yourself, you'll still end up making some bad career decisions. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to have sort of a fireside chat and with the three wonderful panelists. And what I do, if I have some questions, I'm going to take them through. And we're going to make sure at the end, though, that we leave some time for Q&A. And the way you can pose your question is either type in the Q&A box or the chat box, and all of us on the panel will be able to see it, and we'll gauge how much time to leave at the end based on how many questions there are. The last thing I want to say is that the next Yale Career Panel will be on December 6th at 6 o'clock on FinTech. So that should be interesting. We've never done FinTech, but it's a hot area. So we've got three wonderful panelists who will talk about the profession, the segments, and et cetera. So with that, what I'd like to do is now you have the bios of the three panelists. So I won't read them, but what I'd like to do is to have each one of you, and then arbitrarily in alphabetical order, just take a couple minutes, introduce yourself, what do you do, and a little bit about your firm. So it's alphabetical by last name. So Latrise, you want to start?
Sure, happy to do it. Peter, thank you for having me. I want to start with that. This is my second time having a chance to do this, and it's always a great opportunity for me. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you. So Latrise Bassett, I am Yale 98. I was in Ezra Stiles. After graduating from Yale, I started with Anderson Consulting at the time, which is now Accenture. So I have been with Accenture for almost 25 years. I spent my entire career with Accenture, and it's been a pretty wild ride. Today, most people will come into consulting, maybe spend 2, 3, 4 years and are ready to move into industry and do some other things. I took a very different path. I like to say that Accenture had a way of distracting me every 2, 3 years. And before I know it, it was another decade that had passed. But I have worked in several different industries. When I first started, I was very focused on public service, which is where I spent most of my time working with New York City, multiple states, helping them address their technology needs. If you know anything about Accenture, Accenture is a large firm. There's 720,000 of us now, and we have multiple service lines. So there's strategy consulting, there's technology, there's outsourcing. We have Accenture Song that's all around interactive and the advertising agencies. So we've grown a lot over these last 25 years. So I'm excited to be here and field your questions because I'm sure I'll have a lot to share.
Yeah, and I told Latrise and Robert that it's like films, when they have sequels, the it'll be Avatar, this time it's personal or something like that. So we have two repeat panelists. So Robert, so it's safe to say, Latrise, that you won't talk about what it's like to be at a boutique consulting firm, right?
That is correct.
So Robert, tell us about yourself, what you do, a little bit about your firm.
All right, so greetings or good evening, everybody. So Rob Henske, I was Yale 81, Davenport College, chemical engineering major, and swam and played water polo at Yale. I'm married to a Yalie who said she was going to crash the session to warn everybody to not go into consulting. And we can talk about that later in the discussion. So,
but you're still married, so it could be.
And we're still married. But, well, I'm sure we will talk about work-life balance and what the industry is doing around work-life balance as part of the discussion. I joined consulting as a summer intern in business school. I joined a company called Arthur D. Little, which at the time was a top 3 consulting firm. Arthur D. Little really doesn't exist anymore. My last job at Arthur D. Little was actually being the internal person selling Arthur D. Little. My part went to a company called Charles River Associates. So ADL was a very broad technology focused, not in the Accenture definition of technology, but a very broad-based organization. CRA is an economics consulting firm. And I'm a strategy consultant focusing on the chemical industry, but there were reasons behind this. And a decade ago, I took my team from CRA to Roland Berger. Again, focusing on the chemical industry, it's very hard to be in a domestic organization, and CRA was very much a US organization, and given what was going on in Europe and going on in China, needed to be part of a global organization. So amongst the firms here, I'm at the boutique. So we like to think of ourselves as the largest remaining mid-tier firm. Because clearly you have McKinsey, Bain, BCG as the large players in our space. And then we're a European-based firm. We've got a little over 3,000 consultants in 31 countries around the world. And because of the way we grew, which was very country specific, we are less consistent about exactly who we are in each country. So in Europe, we are the restructuring king of Germany. And we're globally the leading automotive consultant on most dimensions of that. You go to the Middle East, we're involved in most of the major infrastructure projects. So it's a very diverse organization. Within this, I get my pleasure by doing consulting work and actually rolling up my sleeves and working with my chemical industry clients. I happen to be the managing partner for Roland Berger in the US, and through a really bizarre set of situations where I got tapped to develop our corporate strategy, I ended up being the chairman of Roland Berger globally. So I have 3 very different perspectives in terms of different roles in consulting businesses, different types of consulting businesses. So happy ultimately to answer questions, but long-winded introduction. I've never been known for being short of words. So
Yeah, and
with that, I'll shut up.
Robert, all I can say is none of you are the oldest compared to me. Just to give you a hint, yeah, I've been investment banking for quite a number of years, and I was in private equity. But when I came out of Harvard Business School, I joined Bain. There were 23 people. So when I left, 800. So you can guess that I'm not 25 years old, right? So Eun Bi, tell the audience about yourself and your firm.
Yeah. I mean, my resume is certainly not as impressive as everyone else on this phone, and I'm certainly not as experienced as everyone in the consulting field, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Eun Bi. I'm a class of 2012, also from Davenport College. I started consulting straight out of undergrad, right after Yale. Started in the Mexico City office for BCG as an associate. I had grown up in Mexico. My family was still there. So I went back to start at BCG there, and then ended up transferring through multiple offices in the US. So if anyone here is interested in more international work experience, happy to talk about that a bit more. Since joining BCG, I've done almost exclusively health insurance work, primarily on strategy, so like growth strategy type of work, and org design or cost cutting exercises, which are two very different types of projects. So happy to talk about some of those experiences as well. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to help answer any questions and really provide very candid experience and perspective as someone that's really actively working in this field day to day on a number of projects.
Yeah, but don't apologize about being younger than the other people here, because actually we recruited you on purpose because we want people who've been in consulting at different, at different lengths of time, because it's an industry that's changed, and what it's like if you're younger versus older can be quite different, as I think all of you will understand. So one of the big challenges, and it's probably a challenge for pretty much every industry, every profession, is that it's to say it's just one industry is kind of misleading. On the other hand, it's very hard to chop industries into different relevant pieces, right? But one of the things I do want to say is there any way that the audience can really sort of think in terms of a career, the way you might divide up the industry? Certainly, there are different industries, right? Then there are different categories of work, such as cost cutting or organizational design or strategy consulting, or and that sort of thing, right? Or product design. I mean, so there are a variety of different ways that you can organize. If for the audience, how should they grapple this? Because I'm sure it's a challenge for them thinking about what part of consulting makes sense for them. Any comments from either one or none of you or all of you about how you might, for someone thinking about a career in consulting, using that criteria, how would you segment the industry, in terms of making career decision? And this is directed to anyone to answer.
As someone that went through this recruiting experience more recently, I think the way I would divide the universe of consulting firms out there would be more of, are you interested in being a generalist, or are you interested in being a bit more specialized and committed to a particular industry or particular practice area, or the type of consulting work that you do? I know it's very BCG centric way of thinking about it, because we tend to be very generalist, but I think that's the simplest way I divide in my mind. The more exposure to different industries and types of work you want, the more it is, the more I would recommend that you go for like BCG, McKinsey, Bain's of the world, or EY's of the world, that will give you that exposure to different industries so that you can pick and choose and then ultimately decide where to specialize. Whereas if you already have something that you're deeply interested in based on what you studied, based on your passion and whatnot, and there's an area that you want to be able to become the expert as soon as possible, then I think that opens the door to a whole new set of consulting firms that you could think of, right? There are a set of consulting firms out there on healthcare in particular, right? I think ZS is particularly good at that, or economic consulting. So I think that's the first question I would ask yourself in making the decision.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good comment, because that also fits into the comment I made before, which is know yourself. I mean, you got to ask yourself, are you the kind of person who can deal with being put into different industries every time, and you have to quickly learn and give advice to a company where it's been in the industry for 50 years or whatever, or you're the kind of person who loves that, or are you the kind of person who really likes to know one particular thing really, really well and realize? I think so. That's a relevant way to think about yourself. Bob or Rob or Latrise, any comments on this segmentation?
I was going to take us. Oh, go ahead, Latrise.
I didn't want to cut you off. I was just going to say, I like the comment about you need to know who you are, but if you think about a company, I'm just going to use Accenture as an example. We cut across both service lines and industries. And it depends on kind of where you come into the company. There are some people that come in, like you said, Eun Bi, they're going to be a generalist. We're not expecting them to automatically know what industry they're going to work in. And sometimes we don't even expect them to know the service line. It's kind of a general consultant that you will come in and you'll get to rotate through various clients and give you an opportunity to get exposed and figure out what it is what you want to do. We do have a strategy arm, and if you are looking to work for the BCGs, the Bains, the McKinseys, I think there's an expectation that at some point you're going to want to go back and get your MBA, or you've already been recruited from a business school. So we also have that opportunity within Accenture. So I think you would know yourself, that is the type of work that you specifically want to do. So you would be targeting strategy consulting for some of these firms. So that's just one thing to think about. I tell people all the time, if you are not sure, because when I graduated, I did not know. Consulting sounded just exciting to me for whatever reason and had no idea what I was really going to be doing. I liked the idea of having an opportunity to work with different clients and be able to get exposed and give myself time to figure out what it is I want to do. And when I look through my career, that's exactly what I was able to do.
Yeah, building on that, a variety of points come to mind. So at one point in my career, in my Arthur D. Little days, there were discussions about Accenture buying part of Arthur D. Little because Accenture was trying to build a strategy business, and we were known for our strategy in our specific industry sector that they were talking to us about. And we had a great meeting in New York, and at the end of the meeting, we realized we used the same word to mean different things. And when Accenture talked about strategy, it was talking about functional strategy. And when we were talking about strategy, we were talking about portfolio management at a corporate level. And so fundamentally different, both legitimate strategy, but this goes to understanding, and again, what is it that you want to do? If I take a slight different approach in terms of thinking about segmentation, you've obviously got big versus small. You have different pyramid structures, which is really the delivery model, which to a large extent differs based on the offer that you have. And the more towards process execution, the bigger a delivery pyramid team you're going to have, which has good points, but it may have some downsides relative to the way, the length of the types of projects that are done, and therefore the diversity of experience and perhaps the amount of direct senior involvement you have within that. I think a fundamental difference in the industry is there is part of the consulting business which is very process oriented, and there is part of the industry that is very bespoke. And everybody's solving the problems that companies are willing to pay large amounts of money for. They're not easy problems to solve, but they're fundamentally different in terms of there is no basic process. There are tools and techniques, but there's a bespoke dimension of how do you assemble these pieces. And then there is a very large part of the market, which is execution support, which is very process oriented. And there are people that are superb on one and cannot do the other, and vice versa.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting point. So let's go to the next question now, which is, where is the profession heading, good and bad? Now, I'm going to say, take your recruiting hat off and don't pretend you're not actually trying to get someone to join your firm, and pretty objective about it. Now, every profession, and we've done 55 of these, it turns out there are good things and bad things, right? So, for example, a good example is being a doctor, right? There are a lot of good things about doctor, new techniques, ways to solve your, patient problem, et cetera. But the negative is, if you can't want to be a doctor because you want to have your own office and run your own practice, so forth, that's getting crushed out by all the regulations. And now doctors are really just paid salary and so forth and working for large corporations and hospitals. If you're okay with that, then it's okay. But you have to recognize that's happening. And you go through each profession, whether it's law firms or investment banks or whatever, they've all gone through some changes, good and bad. So as you think about consulting, what are the changes that are happening now and that you expect to happen that are both good, but also are maybe not bad, but are less good, and that someone applying should really just recognize that, right? And take that into account.
I can jump in.
Sure.
So that's a good question. I think it's hard to talk about consulting as an industry or as a job without talking about the impact of COVID. Pre-COVID, we would travel a lot, we would co-locate at the client side a lot, we would co-locate as a team in person, and that was part of the value proposition, right? Where, teams of 4 or 5 people would sit in the same room together and problem solve together. And that was a big appeal for a lot of people coming into, especially like strategy and management consulting. That has been less of the case because of COVID. And, as a lot of people move into remote ways of working, I would say that experience had sort of gone away for a little bit. I think as we are moving past COVID nowadays, we are starting to go back to normal, but in an evolved way, I would say. So I am definitely seeing less frequent travel to the client side in particular, which probably makes it easier on a lot of folks to be able to stay in this industry longer term, right? Especially folks that have kids, that have family that they want to stay with. But there is also greater flexibility in where we co-locate, right? And taking my case-team experience as an example, we tend to just travel and co-locate in wherever the team is interested in co-locating. And that has added on as additional value proposition, right? If the most of the team is based out of LA or in Chicago, we co-locate there. And, we're still able to deliver on that in-person interaction model, in-person problem-solving experience, but without having to add the pressure of, I have to be at the client side Monday through Thursday every single week, just so that I can show face. I don't think that's a necessary requirement anymore. And in my mind, that's been one of the most positive outcomes of COVID. So that's one thing I'll say. I'll have to think a bit more about the bad.
But there's some negatives too, right? I think because your exposure to other people in your firm, the client, is different. So it's negative too.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, that change is affecting almost every company, right? Unless you're in the restaurant business, in which case it's really hard to, cook from your home, right? For your customer. So do you see that as being kind of a permanent change? And if so, how does that affect how the people who are in attendance should think about the career.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to build on that. One of the challenges, I'm sure every one of our firms is dealing with this. It's very hard in this structure. One, I think it is permanent. Clients want you there for critical sessions, which are really built around decision and or creativity. Teams and Zoom do not work as well when you're trying to get a very difficult issue resolved. You need to be in the room to hash it out. You have a different whole social interaction that takes place when you do that. But clients don't want the armies of consultants showing up, occupying there. It started for health reasons, but they realized there's an awful lot of expense that they were carrying that they don't have to carry anymore. So I don't see that clients want big teams present at their sites anymore. That actually has impact for junior consultants, more junior, because it's typically in those big decision meetings, they want the partners and the principals and the project managers there more than they want to have the junior consultants, the consultants and the senior consultants coming into the meeting. So it takes away part of an opportunity, a learning opportunity for people. The other issue is we're all going to a hybrid model, and it might be co-locating wherever the team wants to meet. I know for a fact in Boston, because I've been getting benchmarks about consulting firm office occupancy, and we're all stuck between 25 and 40% of people sort of working together on a day-to-day basis. It's very hard to maintain the culture and the camaraderie which takes place. And a huge amount of the learning actually takes place from the ability to pop in next door and say, hey, how do you think about this? And we are saying, and I don't think we're unique in this, that the development cycle for people in a pyramid business model, which is up or out, it's taking longer for people to learn the skills necessary to be successful at the next career level.
And to get to know their colleagues, right?
And to get to know their colleagues.
It's hard to form relationships via, video conference, right?
Which is a real vicious cycle, because a lot of people do learn over the shoulder by talking to other people in their cohort group, but they are unable to do that, to your point. So yeah, totally.
Like in my firm, when we have junior people coming in, we require everyone to be in the office for a certain period of time so that they get to meet people. And people understand it, right? But there are other good reasons for being together, like solving complex problems. It's hard to do by Zoom, right?
And from a business management perspective, it raises a whole bunch of different problems because you have to create those opportunities. They don't just happen anymore.
Yeah.
So if I actually look at cohort training and offsite, I think we're seeing a lot more of that. I can't imagine how big compared to pre-COVID my free food budget is, because we use food as a way to get people to get together, both in the offices and at offsite venues. But you have to be very creative to create these because they're not happening normally.
Yeah. Latrise, do you have any comment on that?
The only thing I want to add is it forces you to be a lot more intentional about learning opportunities and building a network. Like, we already tell consultants it's very important for them to focus on their network, because it's how you figure out what your next opportunity is going to be. Where if you're not co-located and you're not in an office space on a regular basis, it's very difficult to do that. So you almost end up with two jobs automatically when you start. Not only are you learning what you're doing every single day, but you're also very focused on how am I creating these opportunities for myself to build relationships and to have a network that you will rely on for a large part of your career. So I think that is a significant difference. It's something that we have to stress, and we have to be intentional on both sides, as a leader and as a manager, but also as someone that's starting these companies. The only other thing I wanted to add is just the complexity and the speed around how our clients need us to be able to come in and show results. We're in a difficult time, and they're not paying us to learn on the job. They're actually paying you because they want you to bring some real insight and to be a game changer. What is going to be a game changer for them when there's so many headwinds ahead of them that everyone can anticipate? So I think that just forces you, the learning curve is really small. You got to get up to speed really fast. And just knowing that, I think, is important for people that are looking to join this career. If you're an eager beaver and like to learn new things and get out there and jump at it, then it's perfect. It's a great environment, but you should be mindful of it.
Some of the versus realities.
Peter, I think or is it just me? I'm having
I didn't know if that was me or not. I wasn't sure if it was my network.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Some realities in your profession. Some realities.
Oh, I don't think we were able to hear much of what you just said.
The reality.
Sounds like your
Reality.
microphone is garbled. While he's figuring that out, I want for everybody on the phone, Latrise had a really critical point. If you're the kind of person that waits for your organization to help create these situations, consulting is probably not for you. That you really have to take your career development seriously to create and look for those opportunities to create that interaction and that networking ability. And that is something, candidly, that we've found with some of our recent classes of graduates, that they expect the firm to do that. And we have to spend a lot of time educating people that this is a two-way street. Both sides need to work on it.
Yeah. Now, can you hear me now?
Yes. Much
Okay,
better.
good. Okay, I just switched microphones. Yeah, so the myth about leaping over buildings with a single bound, faster than a speeding bullet, and occasionally, vulnerable to kryptonite, that doesn't apply to consulting.
Only if you want to be a partner.
Oh,
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, one of the questions is this. Consulting is very popular for Yalees, both from business school, or graduate schools, undergrad, but it kind of competes in the same sphere of some other industries that are similar, right? So it's very common for people to choose between investment banking or private equity and consulting, because there's some similar skills, analytical, so forth, so on. Any comments about what things you think should cause someone to think about consulting versus investment banking or private equity?
I'm happy to start, but I don't want to monopolize the discussion. If you're thinking about, you can think about consulting in two different ways. One is it's a learning opportunity to be a bridge to something else. The other is you're thinking about consulting as a career. And quite honestly, most people coming out of college have no idea what consulting is, so they can't really answer that question until they're in and doing it. But consulting requires you to learn some basic skills like issues analysis and structured communication and great analytic tools and techniques and data analysis, which are relevant in anything that you go to. And it's a team-based environment, so you have to learn how you work and manage your role in teams. And as you move to project manager, how you get the best out of the teams assigned to you. And I think every consulting firm has a shortage of project managers because they are in so demand across industry, across investment banking, across private equity. So I think you can view this as essentially as an advanced degree in how to get ahead in business.
Right.
And that's I'm going to go to consulting to train. And some of you will discover that you love problems that change all the time and the pace of it, and you're going to say, this is the career for me. But I wouldn't expect anyone to start out and say, this is where I'm going to end. I started 38 years ago in consulting, and I said I would stay in consulting until I stopped learning, and I'm still here. I'm still learning something new every day. But this is a people-based business, and so it's really good for people that like working with other people, which
But
is
you're straying from the question, which is comparing to private equity investment, because last time I checked, there were people in those industries, right?
but they are not the same teamwork dynamics in many regards. It's very much task oriented and go run your model. My experience.
Yeah. Well, I will say, just since I have been in private equity, investment banking, and consulting, so I actually can compare. They're really different animals. And I really do think that my advice is, because it would take a long time to explain the differences, my advice to the people who are attending is go talk to people who've been out 1 to 5 years. And the easiest way is just Yale alumni, go through the alumni directories. Yale's are incredibly generous with their time. I mean, if you call someone who's been out 3 years, 5 years, and just say, look, I'm graduating, I'm trying to think about it, 90% of the time, they'll say, I'm happy to talk to you, right? But try to get it from those people, but also compare them, yourself, to that person, and try to reconcile whether or not what they're saying is relevant or not, right? Because it may not be relevant, right? Because you may be a very different person, right? And also, if you have classmates who graduated a year or two before you and you're friends, so they're going to be honest with you, they're a great resource as well to compare. Latrise, anything about this issue of comparison that you'd like to point out?
Well, the only thing I wanted to mention and highlight, because I took a different path within Accenture, although I'm still with Accenture almost 25 years. Right before the pandemic, I moved into corporate functions. So I am no longer in our consulting line working with clients, but I actually now run operations for our various corporate functions now. And I will say my consulting experience has served me so incredibly well in this role for all of the things, Robert, you highlighted. Like, there were skills that I had that I developed, able to synthesize information really, really quickly, be very decisive about what we needed to do, be able to lay out a plan and get from here to there, and then be able to see it holistically, be able to work with people, be an active listener. All that stuff came because I was a consultant, really, and I'd done it for many years. So despite the fact that I moved out of focusing on a $30 million client and then to a $1 billion+ budget and 17,000 people that still needed to get the job done to support Accenture employees, I could make the transition because I had some core skills. And that to me is invaluable. I'm so thankful that I had that time in consulting. I haven't been in investment banking. I debated it. I was an econ major and said maybe I didn't have to work as hard as I did for so many years. But I'm very thankful for the career that I chose in consulting, because I now feel very confident that I could go lots of different places and have some core skills that'll serve me well.
So the perfect segue to the next question, which is, what are the characteristics of people who tend to do well in consulting and are happy in the profession versus people where they may be smart, whatever, but somehow there isn't a match? And it's not just skills. It could be personality, ability to work with people. It could be something totally different, may or may not relate to how you solve problems, so forth. Any comments? Because I think all of you have been in the profession long enough to see people around you who've either failed or succeeded and had some perspective on what seemed to be the differences in those people that explained the success or failure.
I'm happy to jump in here. In terms of what I look for when I look at a successful consultant or someone in my junior team, for instance, right? I think the first thing that comes to mind is the comfort with nebulousness. And this may be more unique to management consulting or strategy consulting, but I really look for someone that is able to get a nebulous problem put it into a structure of how we are going to solve it and come up with the answer. Ultimately, no one knows. There's no textbook answer on how to solve a problem. And we always get thrown different types of problems. So someone that is okay with that lack of prescriptiveness, with nebulousness, will be really important, because that's what you have to grapple with on a day-to-day basis. The second thing I'll say is the ability to tell a good story. And I think, Robert, you were mentioning it a little earlier too, where a lot of the work that we do is, of course, writing the slides, but the way we write the slides is essentially how we tell the story about the problem we're solving, what the answer is. So to be able to effectively articulate the answer, communicate it, and make it super compelling to the client is a really, really important skill. And that's why I would say, even though, I did not major in economics, in math, or in engineering or anything like that, the fact that I majored in history at Yale, and I had a lot of experience telling stories, writing papers was a really important core skill to be able to succeed. So those are two things that come to mind, but don't mean to hog the time. Anything else from other groups?
Those are very good points, because it's not just coming up with the answer, right? You've got to be able to persuade the client in a way that they understand it, but also that they agree with it. And because you can have a beautiful answer, but if you can't communicate it, it doesn't go anywhere. Latrise, Rob, characteristics of people who tend to do well, and obviously the corollary, which is people who don't do so well.
You want to go, or shall
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Laura.
I'm not choosing. I'm letting each of you choose. Right.
I think I'm going to go really quick. The one thing, because Eun Bi, I think you did a great job. I think that's so true, and I don't have a lot more to add there other than EQ. So your emotional intelligence is critically important in this job. I mean, you have to be able to understand who you're interacting with and the way in which they're going to receive information, or when they'll want to talk to you, or what, for you to get to move the needle and to get to achieve your goal, you kind of have to understand who you're working with. And I think over time, if you spend a career in consulting, your EQ is pretty high. You can kind of understand where someone is early on, if they're a friend or a foe. I say this all the time. You need to figure out who your friends and your foes are, and you need to talk to both of them on a regular basis, because you got to know both perspectives. So that's the one thing I would call out that I think is critically important. And if you have no desire to do that, it could probably hurt you in a career in consulting.
And if you have a low EQ, you probably won't have your career won't be very long, right?
I didn't want to go all the way there, but it'd be more challenging.
I'll tell you a personal story, which was, I was supposed to go investment banking. I was the investment banking candidate out of my class at Harvard Business School. And I did very, very well academically. And I was going to go to Goldman Sachs, but Bill Bain called me and said, I'd love for you to join and work for 2 years. It turns out I worked there for about 7 or 8 years, but I remember after 6 months, he called me in the office and he said, the good news is you are really good at solving problems. The bad news is I'm about to fire you. And it was exactly what you said. He said, your EQ is a single digit, right? Now, you're a nice guy, but your problem is you don't understand, when you explain a solution, you don't understand how it's coming across to the other person. They end up feeling bad, but you're not intending to make them feel bad, but you are. So I'm going to give you 3 months, and you either fix this problem or you'll have to call Goldman Sachs.
So interesting on that. Our 3 core values, and it's part of our evaluation system. One is empathy, which is getting to this EQ and really understanding how are you making an impact in a way that people believe they're helping them and not working on them. The second is excellence. And if you are sloppy in what you do, or your view is, I'm going to, current vernacular, the quiet quitter. This is a business that deals with difficult problems that needed to have already been answered. And you can't have mistakes in what you do. And there are people that, You know, the people that have failed are the people that don't bother to proofread, or it's sloppy things, but it's sort of not paying attention to the detail. And going back to this, how do you build your network? Entrepreneurship. You have to create your own USP, so to speak, in terms of how do you move forward in your career. So empathy, excellence, and entrepreneurship. And for us in our organization, a critical dimension is the people who really thrive are intellectually curious. And they're looking to come up with a creative and practical answer versus just trying to go through the motions, that they challenge the way things have been done. And that's just kind of the persona of people that I see very successful. I am going to give an interesting story because there's also a lifestyle issue. And
You want to have your what? Do you want your wife to dial into this panel for this question?
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually said, what are some of the myths? And one of your questions is around myths. And the consulting profession starts with a lot of long hours and hard work. And there's always this myth that it gets better. It actually doesn't get better as you rise up in an organization. The pressures and the effort changes. But everybody still works really long hours as we go through all of this. So as you go through, I once had and since we're talking to Yale's, and we'll take a couple of our HBS positions off the table here for a second, but I once hired somebody from Harvard, and after 3 months, it was clear she wasn't working out, but she actually took the initiative and she said, I think I made a career choice mistake. One, I didn't know I had to travel. This was pre-COVID. And what the killer statement was, I didn't actually know I was going to have to think. So we clearly made a mistake in our recruiting and our candidate selection. But she would have been great in a pure process organization. It didn't fit with the role that she hired into. So this is part of just, again, making sure you know what your strengths are and what you want. And there are lots of great consulting firms out there. They all have different approaches and different cultures. And you just have to go through the homework to find the right one for what you want to do that links to your strengths.
Two things that come up often, different professions. One is attention span, which people don't tend to think of, but different professions require different attention spans. Obviously, if you're a researcher doing research on cancer, you have to think in terms of years to reach any kind of closure. On the other hand, if you're a trader trading commodities, investment banking, 30 seconds is a really long time, right? So any comment about one, attention span, and whether that is a factor in terms of fit with consulting, or does it depend upon the firm? The other is, I find there are two ways that people solve problems. One is where they apply rules, and the other is where they just they look among a lot of things and they see a pattern. And I think there's consulting that's, to be honest with you, the bane when I first started was just to apply this rule. Apply the learning curve, whatever. And there wasn't that much tolerance, but it gradually shifted so that people were willing to say, maybe I see something differently, right? Like, in fact, I actually was the first one to do a project where I proved the experience curve didn't work, which got me for about 2 or 3 days in a lot of trouble until I realized actually it was true, right? So two things. One is this attention span, because everyone has different levels of attention span. Some people have long ones, some not, some years, so forth, some short. Well, that's the first one. And the other is, is the second question. So any comments about whether these are issues for people thinking about consulting?
I do think the first one is really important when considering consulting as a profession. I think one of the reasons why I chose to come into consulting is because I didn't want to commit to something permanently, right? The project-based nature of the work was most appealing to me. And the way I think about my life nowadays is by 8 weeks, 12 weeks at a time, right? I don't know where I'm going to be 2-3 months from now. All I know is what I'm going to be working on for the next few weeks. So that freedom and always being able to shift what I work on, who I work with was really important to me. And one of the reasons why I continue to stay in consulting as well. In addition, like thinking past the projects, I think I'm sure a lot of folks on the call know, especially at BCG, there is this up or out notion, right? If you don't get promoted within the first 2-year window, then it's out. And that's also another kind of risk or caveat to keep in mind, right? A lot of people choose to leave before the 2 years or at 2-year mark voluntarily. But you know, the lifespan of a consultant is fairly short usually. So I think a lot of it's possible to think of consulting as a stepping stone to something bigger, something broader. So you don't necessarily have to think about, oh, I'm committing to consulting forever. I think that's also another benefit.
On that project base, you mentioned the 4 to 8. You know, our average assignment in terms of blocks that somebody would be on is probably 3 months. It's a very different situation for much of Accenture's work, and it's candidly a very different situation for the majority of BCG's work, which is going to be 6 months to a year in terms of many of the projects go longer. But I have friends at Dow Chemical that have been with Accenture for about a decade at this point in time. So different firms will have very different dimensions. So if you like that stability, there are consulting firms which will give you that longevity. If you like the fast transition, a company like LEK that's doing essentially 90% transaction support, and those projects are 3 to 4 weeks, is a different kind of churn. The one thing I think that's common is whether it's a decade-long project or it's the 8-week project or the 12-week project, there are a lot of deadlines. So
very true.
So your attention span has to be sufficient to get you through that deadline. Then you can flake out, and then it's on to the next deadline.
Latrise, any comments about either the
You took
way
the
of thinking
words
or
right out of my mouth, literally, because I was going to say, kind of depends on what consulting firm, kind of depends on the type of consulting that you're doing. And I've done the range. I've done the 12-week and I've done the 3-year. Like I've been there. I think you make a very good point, Peter, around the attention span. But for me, it's been more about patience and commitment to the thing that we were looking to achieve with that client. So there are some people that just are committed to the thing that they've decided to do. I mean, in addition to you have the intellectual curiosity that we've been talking about. You want to learn, you want to really understand, but then you become committed to the thing that you're doing. And then you find yourself in that situation multiple times. This is why I say Accenture has a way of distracting me. I thought it was a 2-year thing. And then before I knew it, it was 10 years because I then got committed to the next thing and then got committed again to another thing. But that's my personality, right? That works for me and my personality. And it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. But it is something to consider if you're thinking about a career in consulting.
I have one last question before we turn to some Q&A, and that is, if you don't stay in the profession until you retire and get the gold watch, what are the exit routes to other professions? And you know, what do you see typically among the people you know who are your firm or predecessor firms in terms of what they did after what they did when they left consulting?
So I'm Boston, so we've got a lot of tech industry around here. So when we've lost people to middle management, and I'm sort of at that 2 to 4 year separation. They've gone into middle management positions at Wayfair or over in Kendall Square in the biopharma industry. Almost literally every one of them has ended up making more money than we were paying, and consulting has always been viewed as a high-paying job in the tech industry. That world is changing a little bit right now, so we'll see how that goes. but they were in very high demand going in that direction. We've also lost people to private equity. Haven't lost many to investment banking, but we've lost some people into the private equity. And in this tech world, we have a lot of people that have been very intrigued in the startup world. And so we're big in the automotive industry. As I said, there's an awful lot of change given mobility. So we had a team that left us, literally a whole team that went and became the core of Rivian, the electric pickup truck manufacturer. And one person took over operations, one took over supply chain, one took over planning, one took over sort of the commercial dimension on that. And some of these guys were senior consultants with 3 years of experience when they left. They now all have big bank accounts. They did quite well. My son worked for Analysis Group, which is one of the economic consulting firms. He did that out of undergrad. He did it for 3 years. It's phenomenal data analytics training. He got recruited into the ag tech sector. And the first job was with a company here in Boston called Indigo, which is sort of seed treatment using the microbiome. So how do you find the right microbiome? He then got recruited into a Dutch ag tech firm that's looking to change the way potato farming, but he was an economics major at Wesleyan, and sort of he used consulting and data analytics to get into commercial roles in the ag tech space.
Any other
Just
comments?
to build on that, though, I do want to highlight on something, because this is for the career panel, and I think some of these questions are pressing for folks on the phone. I do want to highlight, it's easy to go into consulting from iBanking and from private equity, but it's extremely hard to go from consulting into private equity. And I have seen that transition happen for more junior and analyst or associate level folks that have done a lot of DD work, end up getting into the buy side of private equity. But beyond that, the more senior consultants end up going into private equity, but more on the ops side, not on the buy side. So when you're jumping into consulting, there are some trade-offs that you're making. So folks probably should be cognizant of what this means in the longer term of the career trajectory.
And why is it that that investment banks, private equity firms don't hire consultants?
I believe, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm less familiar, but I'm guessing it's about skill sets. Go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say several of the private equity firms have set up their own operations group. So if you want to go from consulting, you're probably going to go into their operations, sort of their value creation team. You're not likely to be hired into the deal team. Once you're there, it's possible, from my experience, to be able to move from their operations team over time to the sort of deal side. But I agree, the other path is you've been a very successful consultant in a specific sector, and then they bring you in as one of their advisors or an operating partner. I've seen going in at that, but that's 25 years into your career. So it really is moving towards that operation side is the primary way that we have had people go from consulting. And candidly, we haven't had anyone that I'm aware of that has actually thought about going to the investment banking side.
Yeah, there's one question from the audience, and it says, although all of you work with firms, could you say a little bit about independent/individual consulting? What advice might you offer someone with an advanced degree who's looking to provide consulting services as a freelancer? Any
I'm monopolizing. I have some very good views. I have several good friends that decided they didn't want the work life. They wanted more control of their life. They became independent consultants. So one issue was being an independent consultant. You may have a great set of network client relationships, but they move on, they may retire, and there is a decay factor of those relationships, which means you have to be really good at a specific topic to be the individual consultant. You probably are not going to be hired for the corporate strategy assignment. You might be hired around coaching in an organization change, where having a psychology degree is typically very strong from that dimension. There are organizations now which are essentially the consultant, the freelance consultant to go to. Catalent happens to be a big one. Oh, sorry. But I would encourage, if you're the individual and you want that consultant, you can start building a network by joining one of the on-demand consulting organizations. And there are organizations that are very functional oriented, and there are organizations that are very industry oriented. So different organizations have different ways, and all of the consulting firms are using these for capacity management. They certainly have been in the last 2 years. So
The reality is, what he's saying is true, is you have to have something that someone's been willing to pay you for.
Yeah.
And you have to have an area of expertise. That's it. If you don't, then you won't survive. And you either get it because you develop a bunch of expertise because you work for an Accenture or whatever, or you happen to have a tremendous expertise, say, because you were at the FDA or something, and so you want to do consulting to help companies, biotech companies, get through the regulatory things. And that's a, specific, but you got to have some expertise that someone's willing to pay you for, or it might feel good, but you're not going to get anywhere. We have reached our hour. We like to start on time, and we like to end on time. And I want to thank the three of you. You brought different perspectives, and I will have to say, you did well in terms of being candid. And I hope this was very helpful for the audience. And I want to thank all of you. And this is being recorded, and it'll be posted, and we'll let people know. So if you want to binge watch it and watch and listen to Latrise over and over again, you will have that opportunity. We'll send the link for the recording to the people who registered. So thank you very much. And I want to thank the three of you. You did a wonderful job. And this is as I said, to take an hour and help a bunch of young people from Yale make the right career decisions. There are worse things, there are worse ways you could spend an hour of your time, right?
Okay, great.
Thank
So
you
glad
very
we're
much.
here. Thank you for
For
having
sure.
me. Thank you, Peter.